Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Varga with co-host, teacher and socialist Annie Lipson. We're online at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as at Don Eduardo Varga on Instagram. And please subscribe, rate to future, and on your notifications, and share your favorite episode where we found this episode. Thank you. All right. Welcome, Michael Kane. Just quickly, we are back with Michael Kane, and Michael Kane is known as one of the most organizing teachers during the lockdowns, and he is the former organizer for Children's Health Defense, and he's also the founder of Teachers for Choice.org, and the lead plaintiff in Kane versus De Blasio, having been denied a religious exemption request and appeal. You fought for so many teachers. And we've had you on What's Left. Well, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. We always have great conversations here, so I'm excited to have another one tonight.
Right.
Well, Andy, go ahead and take it from here.
Yeah, this has been an episode we've been wanting to have for a while, and not just me and Eduardo, but also you, Michael. You reached out. I can't remember who reached out to who first, but when RFK Jr. Made the decision to kind of suspend his campaign, or suspend part of it at least, and then at least say in the swing states support Trump, you were like, I had concerns about that. Like, I didn't like it. I didn't like it before, and I didn't like this either. And you were like, hey, we can talk about this on What's Left. And I was actually surprised you'd want to, because it was like, oh, he went from bad to worse, in my opinion, and like, would you want to talk about that? And maybe in my mind, I was like, wait, did Michael Kane maybe change his mind? And well, we're going to find out today, actually, because
that's right.
I don't know what we'll be agreeing on, disagreeing on. But this discussion is a follow-up to the last episode where you were pretty much giving a pretty full-throated support for RFK Jr.'s run as a Democrat, or potentially as an independent, but really talking about the possibility of putting medical freedom really at the forefront of the American conversation. The idea of anti-censorship values being put at the center of the American conversation, and within the Democratic Party, where censorship was a big thing. These are some of the things I remember you speaking to at that time, and even a potential anti-war candidate in regards to Ukraine, because remember, the war in Israel hadn't really stepped off. At October 7th had not happened. And then I think from us, you had heard, first of all, we are pretty much we don't vote, and we've actually encouraged people to not vote as a part of fighting the system. And we were very critical of RFK Jr. for essentially resurrecting the system. Like, he had been part of exposing that system that had been attacking people under COVID, and now here he is resurrecting it. And we had many criticisms of that. That would be a summary, I guess, quick of what I remember. And I guess I'll just say, is that kind of roughly what you remember from our discussion last time?
Yeah, that is basically what I remember. I remember pushing back quite a bit on the don't vote side of things. And yeah, I remember really, really giving my pitch for why Bobby should be the next president. And now we're in a space where that's not going to happen. We know that. There are two choices, Coke and Pepsi, or whatever that we have right now. And, I definitely view that in terms of a lesser evils and what might be possible for medical freedom, because I find what Bobby was able to do with the discussion about medical freedom to be remarkable. It was something that was in the ghetto that became real mainstream discussion. And there's this weird pivot that happened to food, and the poisons and chemicals in our food is everywhere, and a valid discussion to have. I mean, red dye 40 and all the like are important. My kids don't consume that. I'm very, very aware of those things. But vaccines are not in that conversation anymore. Even pharmaceutical products aren't in that conversation anymore. And a number of us have wondered, like, well, why exactly is that? What's going on? And in response to that, me, John Gilmore, Rita Palma, and Shannon Joy medical freedom activists, commentators, media personalities. We created a petition called Makeamericahealthyagain.vote. And if you go there, it has two strong asks to President Trump if he gets reelected. One is ending liability for vaccine makers, because as a lot of people, as your viewers probably know, vaccine manufacturers are immune. If they injure and kill people with their products, they have immunity from the federal government. And the second thing that we're asking for is any state that denies an as of right philosophical or religious exemption to vaccination should be denied specific federal funds. This is something that's possible, like akin to the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. I don't know if you remember, that was federally instated across the country by saying, well, you don't have to have it, but we're cutting off this road and infrastructure federal funds to your state if you don't do that. So that's what some of my activism is doing right now, is trying to keep these critical issues that I've been battling for many years, even before COVID, in the conversation, and not edged out by the food stuff. I should say, just in full disclosure, I work for a super PAC called American Values 2024. It fully backed Bobby Kennedy to be the next president of the United States. And when Bobby pivoted, we pivoted as well too. And we're now that organization that I work for is in support of Trump getting in the White House, for Bobby to be a part of that administration. And I definitely see value there. I definitely do think Trump is a better choice than Kamala Harris. But I'm not here tonight speaking on behalf of the PAC. I'm here speaking on behalf of myself, Michael Kane, all the work and activism that I've done. I see tons of problems with Trump. That's why I got so into Bobby Kennedy for president. And so now I just see the battle, the conversation, and the need having shifted in a different way. I think Bobby was taking on these issues much more full-throated and much more head-on than what I'm seeing from Trump. And the other thing is, Bobby Kennedy could say a lot of great things, even at a Trump rally. But guess who the boss would be if Trump wins? Not Bobby Kennedy. And so we need commitments from Trump. And so that's where some of my efforts have moved to. How much commitments can we get from Trump? And then lastly, I'll say, regardless of who wins, there's going to need to be large and continued grassroots efforts in New York, all in California, all across the country. It's going to need to happen. There'll be different strategies to it. The last thing I just want to say about voting, which is something I really did push back hard on you guys last time, and I think I would now as well too. I want to give a specific example as to why I think voting is so critically important. I know people similar to you who are very anti-establishment, anti-vote, that have even gone and revoked their own right to vote. They've removed themselves from the voter rolls. Something popped up in New York, a proposal 1, a ballot initiative. And the proposal 1 ballot initiative is called the Equal Rights Amendment by some, but it's not. I call it the Parent Replacement Act. And what it does is it makes it illegal to discriminate against anyone based on gender, pregnancy outcomes, age, national origin, and about 7 other categories. So if you can't discriminate against someone based on age, someone is 14 years old, they need to be treated like a 34-year-old. So if they want to get a psychotropic medication prescribed to them, the parent can't stop them. Vaccine, parent can't stop them. Surgery, parent can't stop them. So this is to change the New York State Constitution. And I'm telling people, go make sure you're registered, go and vote. And if you don't vote for a single candidate, I don't care. Flip your ballot over, vote no on the proposal. And then I greatly appreciate you, because I do think we need to maintain the integrity of the New York State Constitution. They're trying to attack it in a different way. And I just bring that up because I don't think any of these solutions are one size fits all. Any solutions you're going to talk about or that I'm going to talk about. And I think we need to be nimble to be able to utilize every single tool we have, because we never know what the state is going to hit us with and how they're going to hit us and what angle they're going to come at. So anyway, I kind of babbled a lot there.
No. And Eduardo, do you want to say anything about the previous episode or my summary of it?
No, I think we're good. I think we should I think you've given a good summary. I think Michael Kane was on it for those very reasons that he has brought up. As far as voting, I personally don't vote federally or nationally. I just believe, like, if you have your group, your organizing efforts, and you have your local ballots, if anything, I do vote in those areas. I've stated that on What's Left. I do think that there's some
Yes, you did. Yeah.
to that. I have after the whole people have come to realize after the whole what do you call it, the delegate elections, like the way that Hillary lost with the electoral votes and versus the popular vote. I think people were surprised how that had worked, and that's a lot of the reasons why people have been dismayed, and it's also much of my reason have come to my understanding that I just don't trust. I'm Mexican too, so it's just so much corruption in the USA and Mexico about how these national votes work. But locally, yes. So just to say, I do believe in your organizing of your community votes, your public education votes, even though sometimes I do feel that those are hijacked by who has more money. So it depends a lot on who is speaking. Anyhow, so yes, why don't we move forward to the next thing, because I don't think I have much to say regarding the past of our interviews.
Yeah,
Michael Kane.
and I guess so. The way I came to know you, Michael, was through your work in Teachers for Choice and the work you did within the mandates, and you had convinced me and Eduardo that we should also do our own grassroots efforts to get people on the ground beginning to fight for against the state, locally, citywide, statewide, ultimately, and possibly federally, in its attempt to force medical procedures on people that they don't want. And so you were and are a grassroots activist, and that is what I think is so important about our relationship is how you've helped kind of like get us started. And despite my differences over you kind of getting more electorally drawn, you've always been willing to talk about it. So I respect that, and I want to carry on with that regardless of what happens in the elections. It's important for us to stay in conversation because you're trying to do that work on the ground. Let me just say something about first elections. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but from my vantage point, elections are a political intervention of the ruling class into the working class to basically confuse them, frighten them, embarrass them, cajole them into basically giving up on fighting for their own actual values, independent political values. And so the fight for an independent working class or independent grassroots movement is partly going to be built by the fight against the election system as it is constituted under capitalism. So even at the time, even though a lot of my criticisms of RFK were what his resurrecting of the Democratic Party, an establishment candidate, I wouldn't have actually supported a vote for him had he been running as independent. I would have said that is also not helping us. I could have maybe said that not quite as bad as if he was going for either a Democrat or Republican or as a Democrat or Republican. But basically, I've just drawn the conclusion that we, for the sake of the movement, have to get out because I see the negative. I've been doing work for years, and you've probably seen it as well. The elections deflate and have this impact on in my opinion, on the grassroots movement of making people focused very much on somebody else's politics, Barack Obama's politics or Bill Clinton's politics. This is lesser evilism in the Democratic Party, but also on the other side, it gets people excited and interested in some Republican or some establishment politics, moving away from their own. And that, for me, that we have to get out of that in order to have the possibility of actually changing the world in a way it's going to need to be changed. But let me go to what I was very disappointed with RFK Jr. when he made the shift to get out of the campaign, or suspend his campaign. I wasn't in agreement with what he was doing before, but I was even more upset with what he had chosen to do. And I have to explain that because, in my opinion, going from Kamala Harris to Trump is just going from one establishment candidate to another, in my view. These are two establishment candidates, and they have maybe a slightly different way they're going to do establishment. They're pretty close, actually, but they might be slight differences, but they're basically two establishment candidates. And when RFK Jr. suspended a campaign that had been about anti-censorship, anti-surveillance, medical freedom, and maybe anti-war, and then goes ahead and tells us that Trump is going to be your anti-war, anti-surveillance, anti-censorship, medical freedom, and even Trump will make America healthy again. And let me just put Trump out of it. The Republican Party, like, because Trump is a loaded word right now. It's almost like saying fascist, you know. So and people hear Trump and they get triggered. I don't. Trump, Kamala, Biden, Clinton, Obama, those are all the same names for me, and they're all liars, and they're all people who mean harm to us. And so RFK Jr., who has won the trust of people, and I understand why he had won that trust of people, because he had waged a fight. I'm not going to say he waged the fight like you did, Michael. I don't actually trust him as much as I trust you, not because I know you, because I've seen you on the ground, and I don't know where he was. But I don't. I think he cashed in all that trust and used it to sell people a lie, that this candidate was going to be anti-surveillance when they had been Operation Warp Speed, which is about surveillance, to tell them he was going to be anti-censorship when Trump is for Israel and has been calling for candidates or calling for campus people to be silenced. So that's not anti-censorship. To say he's anti-war is like, no, he's basically wanting to offload the Ukraine war onto NATO, and him and JD Vance want to focus on China, and they certainly want to help Israel. You cannot be an anti-war candidate and full-throated support for Israel. And I'm not even, like, at this point, I'm not even calling out RFK Jr. for that, although I think that's crazy. He does that. But to me, it shows the complete fraudulence of saying to people that this is an anti-war candidate. And in terms of medical freedom, no, Trump only recently, not recently, about 6 months ago, was basically saying, I was the guy who brought you Operation Warp Speed. I brought you the wonderful vaccines. And it's like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that guy's going to do anything on medical. And I know how deeply embedded the CDC and those government institutions are to the Department of Homeland Security, are to the CIA. I don't care if you're Trump or if Robert F. Kennedy is heading something up. There's no way you're going to make these things good for people, because they are designed as capitalist institutions to harm people in this country, to worsen their health. And the last thing that really convinced me that, well, I'm not the last thing, but one of the biggest things in some ways, as I thought about it, because when I listened to RFK's speech that he gave at the time when he was saying he was suspending his campaign, before he talked about the swing states, about when was that, when he gave that speech? Do you remember when that was?
Yeah, that was just a few months ago. It was very shortly after the quote unquote assassination attempt against Donald Trump.
And that was, I can't remember. Oh, it doesn't matter, but it was several months ago.
July into August. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like thinking, because he kept on saying, if I believe Trump, if I, believe that that he will do this, he was cautionary even in that. And I'm like, man, RFK is a lawyer. Like, he knows what you do when you want to hold somebody's feet to the fire and you want to reach an agreement. You get them to put it in writing. Like, how has that not happened? Like, the fact that this person who's a lawyer didn't get it in writing and then wants to tell me that I should trust Trump because I should trust him. I'm like, why? First of all, how can I even trust RFK Jr.'s judgment when he thought he was going to play this whole game with the Democrats and he was completely wrong? And then he switches sides. So I can't believe his judgment, but honestly, I actually believe that the good things I used to believe about him, I don't even believe those anymore. Because at this point, a lawyer who tells me to believe somebody without saying, I've got this in writing, is a person who's trying to sell you a lie. And so that's my pitch, if you will.
Yeah. Should I respond to that, Ardwater?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah. So you make a ton of good points. A lot I flat agree with. In terms of in writing, this has bothered me major league. Trump's platform that he has out there, his wording, his messaging is 20 promises to make America great again. Maha's not there. Make America healthy again is not there. I've pushed on this. People with more clout, doctors with more clout, with millions of followers have pushed on this. it's still not on his website. That's like, wow, because what you put on your campaign platform, what you put on that website, that matters, and everybody knows that that matters. It does. Saying it matters as well too, but once you post it on social media and once you put it on your campaign platform, it's in writing, and everybody's aware of that. So to me, it's not um, just a minor point that we don't have a 21st promise to make America healthy again. I do agree with that. Um, what happens when Bobby ends up going to support Trump is I think we talked a little bit before the camera started, before we started recording. The attempted assassination attempt happens on Donald Trump. His ear is supposedly just nicked. Um, It's a very bizarre situation from what I can see. I actually talked extensively with Ryan Christian from The Last American Vagabond about this. We actually did a Twitter Spaces about this where we talked to him extensively about it. I think he's done the best analysis of this, and I think the truth is we don't know what happened. We don't. There's just so much loose ends all around this. But within an hour or so after this, Callie Means calls Bobby Kennedy. Callie Means is a safe foods advocate that I think became a whistleblower 2 years ago, like right when COVID starts. So he's kind of new, Callie Means. It's not like Bobby's been doing this almost 20 years, right? Um, and Callie calls him and says, "Hey, I think you should become Donald Trump's vice president candidate." Bobby said, "That's the worst job in Washington. I'm not interested." They hang up the phone. Then Bobby talks to, and Bobby's disclosed all of this publicly. Bobby talks to his family and then says, "You know what? Maybe I should talk to Trump." He texts Callie Means and says, "I won't be his VP, but I'm willing to talk to him." Within minutes, Trump calls him. And some of that video leaked of the call that was happening. And Trump says to him, "You should drop out and endorse me. It'll be good for you." And from there goes into this whole series of meetings and different things and discussions that Bobby does end up doing just that, essentially dropping out, although he is on the ballot in some states still, in a lot of states, dropping out and endorsing Trump. Um, the what is this organization called that I just heard about today? The Center for Countering Digital Hate has come out, and there was a meeting on January 8th where they said they might have to intervene in the 2024 election to stop election disinformation, and even mentioned black ops being set up to look at RFK. Okay, so um, all of that stuff feels weird to me. Trump's nicked by the ear, fight, 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 fight. All of these things that, like, I'm like, wait, what's going on here? All of a sudden, I felt like the whole world's a stage or something while I'm watching this. And now we even have leaks about, organizations talking about black ops on Bobby Kennedy, on a family who is way too familiar, unfortunately and sadly, with assassinations. Um, and at the same time, the Democratic Party is doing lawfare on Bobby to the point where they make his candidacy, where he admits, and his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, um, that I have no path to victory, which is something I also appreciated because he said he was in it to win the election, not just be a protest vote or a spoiler vote. And I appreciate. I've voted for Jill Stein in the past. I voted for Libertarian and Joe Jorgensen because, as I understand, the value in protest votes at times, but that he didn't want to do that. Um, I feel like Bobby was painted into a corner quite intentionally, and he ended up picking up the ball and doing what he thinks he still can do. And what he still can do is to keep medical freedom in the conversation with a group of people that are gravitating for this. The MAGA, so when you talk about grassroots work in New York City, when I was fighting against the mandates, and we got 3,000 people in front of City Hall in August of 2021, and our movement was growing. And then we got even more than that in September and November, and then January, and then defeat the mandates, and then the trucker convoy, right? That was that whole real historic buildup. Um, at least 60% of the people that were there, probably more like 70, were MAGA conservatives, or at least conservatives, many Trump supporters. So although 20 years ago medical freedom was really a progressive left thing, that's the only people that would talk to you about like bodily autonomy and declining vaccinations and stuff like that. But a lot has changed. So I appreciate what Bobby's doing and I get it and I support it to a certain level. But I don't trust Trump either. That's why we have the petition that we have at Makeamericahealthyagain.vote. That's why tons of medical freedom leaders are signing on to that, even people who are saying, I'm voting for Trump for sure. But I'm not going to stop making demands. I'm not going to stop making asks. The last thing I want to say is that Bobby Kennedy is a part of the Trump campaign. He's going around and speaking. At the rallies. He's getting huge applause from the people. I think the people support him more than maybe Trump and the campaign do. They love having a Kennedy, first Kennedy ever to endorse a Republican. They're really jazzed and psyched about that. And we're seeing all of this. We're seeing all of this energy, and people. The MACA movement loves the "Make America Healthy Again" branding and messaging and stuff. At the top of Trump's campaign is a woman named Susie Wiles. Susie Wiles is the co-chair of Mercury LLC. This is the largest big pharma PR firm on the planet. Yeah, riddle me that, right? So here's all these competing forces coming in. Maha's not on Trump's website. Bobby's getting huge applause and he's more relevant. He is helping Trump to win this. But there's Susie Wiles as well too. This is the grotesque game of politics that happens. And the last thing I'll say in defense of Bobby Kennedy on all of this stuff, the Kennedys, to me, seem to have this unique ability, and not all of them, but I think Bobby's dad did, I think his uncle did, to play in this fucking gangster game of politics. And that's what it is. It's a game of gangsters. And every once in a while, there's a statesman or two you run into, but it's gangsters and murderers and war profiteers and, corporate capitalists, extortionists. This is what you're doing. The diplomacy of that is, I've actually been in Crystal City by the Pentagon as a reporter decades ago, and covering military and politicians and stuff. The feeling in the air is so weird. It's such an odd vibe in DC, especially military events and press conferences and all of this stuff. I think it's a very unique individual that can dance in that stuff and still keep some form of moral focus of a goal that they have that transcends this despicable cesspool that they have to get in and they have to play in. And I think that's an extremely unique skill that very, very few people have. I think Bobby and Nicole Shanahan are looking to the midterm elections, and I think they're looking 4 years ahead as well, too, in terms of what could happen next. Because I don't believe any of this rhetoric that this is the most important election of my life. Well, it's not.
Mhm.
I mean, I hear that every 2 years, every 4 years, we hear that all the time. I don't buy that on either side.
Right.
The last election when Joe Biden won, and people were saying it was so important for Trump to win. Joe Biden won and made my life hell. I mean, he and that whole apparatus took away my career, ruined my career, almost ruined my family. And thank God he didn't. But also in that opposition to medical freedom fighters like myself came a movement that was historic, that made history, and that I am damn proud that I was a part of. So, um, I don't want Kamala Harris to be president, But if it is, we'll see. We'll see how do people react. We'll see what happens from that and what comes next. I don't like the sensationalism of that most important yada 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 in my lifetime. I yeah, so I don't quite agree with that. So anyway, I said a lot, probably too much.
Eduardo?
Michael, I think, as Andy, I trust you. We've had lively discussions. Our last conversation did beat my own episode on sex and tech, because I was in Colombia, and I was doing a lot of research on technology, and how there's now a lot of, you're familiar with the fourth industrial revolution.
Yes.
And Alison McDowell's work. And so a lot of what we're going into the world with AI and just the use of technology, even in our intimate lives, that episode that I did gained a lot of views, but yours beat me.
Oh, yeah, I got
it wasn't 1,000; it was 11,000.
Well, it was also just a hot topic in that moment. Bobby Kennedy
Right.
was such a novel thing from out of nowhere. Yeah.
And people, I think people trust you. I think in our community, which
thank you.
isn't a very clear community, because we have a sort of a left-right kind of mixed bag, and in all this way of seeing the world and the point of view, at the lens that we see through that U.S. American lens of what's red and blue. I think it doesn't work for a lot of people, because you're made to be a team of one other of the football team, but people do watch our show or listen on other platforms. They've commented. They do trust people like RFK Jr. because they were made to feel, mad. I remember being at one of the rallies in San Francisco. I think, were you with me, Andy? I forget. I was knitting, and we were there together. And there was a woman there that blocked from all, just nextdoor.com, blocked from Facebook, blocked from YouTube, blocked from, and she felt like she couldn't even talk to her neighbor. She felt like she was the mad woman in her neighborhood. She was the only person. And then she saw all of us together, and she felt there was this community together. It was hard during that time, 2020, 2021. And so obviously, figures like you in New York and what you've done, figures like RFK Jr., figures in our community here, I think that in NASA, I currently am in Mexico, where we didn't have those issues. AMLO was seen as a mad president as well. The president here didn't do lockdowns. Individual businesses did, but not as a whole, not nationally. It wasn't mandated. And so a lot of tech and people who from the freedom movement came here to Mexico to find refuge and to fight against, or to leave, to like an exile, I think it was. But anyhow, what I'm trying to say is, we're speaking to an audience that does feel conflicted, right? Because some people feel like now they have to support Trump, or they don't feel comfortable with either or. And what you spoke to about all that censorship, I wanted just to bring up how much people were made to feel crazy during that time, when we all knew what was going on. We had the Twitter files come out finally that were released, and it was clear that the Biden administration wanted to suppress content about COVID-19, which we all knew, but no one was willing to say, or there was no leak at that time. And it was clear scientists and doctors were being suppressed, who and were disregarded, or what do you call it? Demote, or however the algorithms work, we're not as enhanced, or their voices were suppressed. And so I remember this time, and just listening to you, talking to you, brings me back that trauma, that back to those times. So I could see why there is a passion for wanting, this make America healthy again. This desire for us to not to take care of our bodily autonomy away from surveillance and censorship. Andy touched on it some, and he talked about that. And I'm surprised. I'm not sure. Like you talk about how much you trust Bobby, and I don't know how you how you, or how do you settle with the fact that he's also very supportive of Israel, and Israel sells um, this technology, this what was it, Pegasus? It is Pegasus, and the surveillance technology to Mexico, to my country, to spy on revolutionaries like the Zapatistas, and they spy on Palestinians, and the technology, the surveillance technology that they have developed is one of the highest, best performing in the world, and I don't know how Bobby contends with that. I guess what's what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that. I think that's
Yeah.
fair game for us to talk about that. Um, I don't support Bobby's position on Israel. It's interesting. A reporter named Jeremy Lafredo, for the Gray Zone, for Max Blumenthal's Gray Zone, was just detained in Israel, basically for embarrassing them. He basically did really good reporting that showed that their Iron Dome wasn't so iron, right? And because of that, Israel said, you're guilty of releasing government secrets to the enemy during wartime. He was standing legally taking photos
Yeah.
from that just legally showed what the damage was. But we know how Israel gets down. We know how they do things. They pulled up, they beat him up, they detained him, they scared the crap out of him, they took his phone, all of that stuff. Um, to his credit, Bobby Kennedy came out and spoke out for Jeremy Lafredo and said he should be sent home. Jeremy Lafredo worked for Children's Health Defense. Bobby knows Jeremy. A number of pro-Palestine people work for Children's Health Defense and have worked for Bobby and such as well too. Bobby is staunchly pro-Israel. But that again is an example, despite how that I disagree with Bobby in that area over Israel, and I'm not very well defined on my own position there too, because it is a very complex area that really requires a depth of knowledge, and to the degree that I've done in medical freedom, I feel to really have real valid opinions there from what I've gathered on it. But the fact that Bobby does have people around him of different opinion, did put out the State Department didn't call for Jeremy Lafredo to be sent home, Biden's State Department, but Bobby did do that. And so I see him do tough things and do the moral thing often in these situations. Even Max Blumenthal publicly thanked Bobby for doing that, because Max knew that was hard for Bobby to do and knew it was the right thing. Um, the other thing I want to say, which makes this really tough for me politically, and I think you guys are going to appreciate this, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. When all this shit went down with COVID, when the lockdowns came, when things were really bleak in New York City, and we started to fight, no close, close to nobody from the left was there from us. I think you can appreciate that. I mean, you guys were one of the first like real bona fide leftists that I found that I was like, holy shit,
Yeah.
me amigos, let's do this. This is great. And Allison introduced us. And that was a real great moment for me because I was making so many alliances with conservatives. Speaking of those alliances, people that stood with us quickly included conservative Jews, Hasidic Jews, Zionist Jews in New York were standing with us saying, you're right. They shouldn't be forcing this on you. And then, but all the people who are coming out and fighting for Palestine and have real valid arguments, some of them are still wearing masks. And none of them have said, I was wrong about COVID. You guys were right. I'm sorry. No, they haven't. As a matter of fact, many of them, if the lockdowns and stuff come again, will turn their back on me when I do this as well too. So even though I tend to agree more with them in the Israel-Palestine issue, politically, I have a group of people that stood with me that are on the other side of that. And that just makes it complex for getting things done with medical freedom. What precisely do I do in that situation when I have people who agree with me on a whole host of issues and we disagree on other ones? I've become pretty good at leaving those aside, working where we agree, and making progress and actually being effective. This is an area that is very tough for me. very tough for me to grapple with in terms of what is right, what do I do, what don't I do. At the end of the day, though, my moral compass is towards medical freedom and is towards making laws, rules, and life better for people in New York and America in that space of medical freedom. So, it's not a perfect solution, but that's just currently where I find myself. And I'd love to hear what both of you
Michael,
think.
I guess so. If it is like your position is for medical freedom, though, I mean, surveillance, right, is something is an issue, right? I think
100%.
Bobby supported the surveillance of even Martin Luther King Jr. He was interviewed, and the surveillance of the wiretapping of Martin Luther King Jr. And I also feel like beyond Israel and Palestine, even at the border, like massive surveillance is happening. And again, I mentioned Alison McDowell's name because anyone watching our show is clear on our positions about the fourth industrial revolution and what we're going into. There are now Google lenses that one can wear, and you can basically. There was a leak by Harvard students recently where they were able to, I think it was, break into those lenses, which, like, to use them. I'll put the study in our episode notes. I don't want to give the kind of the how the wrong information, how I presented it, but they would now, these Google lenses can now map out anybody and get their identities and where they've studied, and just by moving your lenses literally over to a person, identifying them, and there's biometric analysis, like the digital print.
just by seeing them, they could then find their Facebook page, they could find their LinkedIn, and you could be
Right.
like, oh my God, Sari Wells, you went I
Exactly.
met you at Haverford University. Like,
Yes,
oh,
I mean, I'm preaching to, I don't think I have to tell you this, but I think just for our audience to be aware, there's so much going on. And at the border, it is like, I feel the technology is being used. There's an AI center now. We did an episode on it, and geofencing is an issue. And this is where the military practices their surveillance. To everything that is used at war is used at the border. And a lot of the things that Bobby has said about the borders just kind of doesn't sit well with me. I mean, I'll just read from directly, so I'm not misquoting anything. This is from the website itself. I'm looking at Kennedy Maha. This is, we are to retighten border security to regain control over the border. We will use technology that was installed at the border, then dismantled by the Biden administration. I don't believe that Biden administration did any less or let tons of immigrants in. I think they actually heightened a lot of the border technology. And it goes, such as cameras, lights, and motion detectors, coupled with physical barriers in key areas. And he says, or the website says, we have the technology to prevent people from getting through undetected. We can control the border. We have the technology. We can deploy personnel. All we need is the will. And there's also stuff from this website, Amnesty International, talking about, I have a report here just quickly, and you're a journalist. I mean, I didn't know you were a journalist before, but the digital border by Amnesty International, the digital border, immigration, technology, and inequality, which I will also link in the episode notes, that talks about how migration technology, everyone is not given consent. People are made to, sort of under duress consent, if you will, giving all of their identities to create a digital identity that everyone is to just forcefully have. That is illegal migration that we're advocating for. And, in California, there's still this real ID. There's still the option to do something alternative. But that's what we're basically going to go into. And I'm afraid of that. And I'm I can't believe how much I have given to this technology as a child. I didn't even know, by having an ID, applying for one, being proud of one when I was an adolescent. And then suddenly we're here criticizing undocumented illegal aliens or whatever. And I think we should all be undocumented illegal aliens, right? We should just all not have these digital footprints. And that's what I'm afraid of. We are just promoting that. And I'm not sure if Bobby understands that. We talk about the Children's Health Defense. I read some articles about AI. I read some articles on technology and the future. And then it just doesn't seem like it aligns with what we're talking about and border security. I'm not sure if he's trying to cater to a certain base so that they can vote for him, or if he's being true to his values and principles, because if we're true to our values and principles, even here on What's Left, we have had divided audiences where they've stopped listening because we have a contentious issue regarding this issue. And the medical freedom suddenly becomes pro border security. And, and Trump and Kamala talk about both. They both talk about increasing border security. And I have lived in Colombia this past year, and now I'm living in Mexico here. And I'm telling you, I can see clearly people on the ground who have been through Central America, who have been in Colombia, who've been at the border, and I have been there and support. Well, I don't have to be careful here, but I have been at the border and seen how these things happen, and everything. People are made under CBP1 applications, and on the app, everyone has to have a digital footprint. Everyone.
Right.
And so I don't know, like, I trust you, and you've worked with people, people of color in communities. I've seen your work. I've read some of the things that I've seen you on YouTube. I know that you are pro Black Lives Matter, and you're also a person who worked in public education. So I know you've worked with communities that I'm speaking about, but it doesn't align. I don't know how to explain anymore, like how we're
I think you're doing a good
really
job.
aligned.
Yeah.
We're not focused on the right thing here.
So,
does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I want to say that Children's Health Defense and what they put out is not always identical to Bobby Kennedy. Sometimes people think they're one and the same completely. They're not. Bobby was the chairman of it, but Children's Health Defense has a mission that they go towards. And if Bobby steers off of it, Children's Health Defense still goes on that mission. So sometimes you might see them stay truer to things because they're also not running for office, right? They're also not trying to create a political agenda. I entirely agree that what's happening with the border, with the high-tech situations, is very, very disturbing, because how long till that goes everywhere? It's real easy to have a situation where you have tons of people coming into this country, frame it a certain way, create a problem, and then have a solution for it. I don't agree with you that nobody should have ID. I do think there should have IDs. I have a driver's license. They asked me to make it a real ID. I said no. I still have that option. My driver's license actually is like a little broken. I flew recently where they wanted to not let me fly. They're like, "Do you have a passport?" I'm like, I'm flying domestic. I'm like, "No." And they let me fly, but apparently I think there is a rule in certain states you have to have a real ID to fly. Otherwise, you have to have your passport. They let me go. I mean, well, there's proof I'm not on any list.
And just to say that they're trying to make that, I think it's May 25th. They're trying to do another round of saying yes for sure. Finally, they've been trying to do that for a while. They're now saying another bite at the apple, where they say now, as of like, I think it's May 25th or something like that, then you have to have a real ID or passport to fly.
Or passport, right? So I don't know that I'm not I'm not an anarchist to the point where I think everything should be complete open borders and there should be no identification. I think there are real threats out there that we do need to consider. I do think there
But if we have security checkpoints, Michael Kane, I mean, sorry, if we have security checkpoints, then we have an abuse of power like we had with Title 42. Remember that? Where
No, I don't remember
Title 42, which was in a way to expel migrants because of COVID reasons, because it was suddenly we had to expedite, we had to take care of our border, and we had to make sure that everyone couldn't come. And so we had these security checks. We had to, for everyone's health and everyone's safety. Suddenly, you could give anyone, international laws were allowing people to cross over borders and given refugee status if they met the criteria according to the courts and But suddenly with Title 42, because we have these checkpoints now, suddenly you can't have, we suddenly expelled migrants. And that was a way until we had the Ukrainian war. Suddenly, I don't know what happened to Title 42. Everyone was accepted from Ukraine. And that is what happens when you have these security checkpoints. Sometimes you say yes, sometimes you say it's all arbitrary. And that's what I'm against, right? So I'm not saying, like, I trust what I understand what you're trying to say. Like, should we have some sort of security? Should we have someone else on What's Left that is also pro security, such as checking someone? But then these things get exploited. Yeah, is what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, and just officially, Eduardo and I have gone on record as either being socialist enough or anarchist enough to say, no, we don't want any state. We don't want any driver's license. So you're right. That's our position. And so go ahead. There.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I do understand that. Um, I can't say I'm fully versed in where I think the exact balance is. You're 100% right. It gets abused, to where Cubans could come in and other groups can come in, and then other groups can't come in at all, and then absolutely that is an issue and it is abused. I also think, and I've always thought, the idea of calling people illegals, there's no person that's illegal. If somebody committed a crime, they committed a crime. If somebody did something that was unlawful, but to dehumanize somebody by calling them an illegal or illegals, I think so misses the mark of what we need to discuss and do. I worked with just dozens and dozens and dozens of undocumented teenagers, and just dealing with them and their struggles. And what I headed a Dreamers Alliance at my old school that I was at before, and you learn a lot by being able to work with people that come from different places and you have different perspectives than you, and I do see the value in that. I am concerned with what is happening technologically, and I do see the border as a trial space for that, for sure, because if the imagery and the view currently in America is this: there's an invasion, which I also don't agree with, right? And that's what they're saying, and that creates the perfect grounds to where everybody in this federal election right now, even Democrats that might have been more open borders supporters, have to say they're for the security and for locking down the border now to get elected. That's the current mainstream situation now. And it almost feels like you allow a situation to get a certain way because you know what you want to do. It's not that you couldn't have maintained a normal border processing that doesn't use biometrics, that doesn't create a digital implant, because we've done it for over 100 years. We don't have to do those things. But if you make a problem, now you can introduce these things first at the border and then continuing on. I do think it's a major problem. I unfortunately, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how to tackle those issues. I haven't paid a lot of attention to the issues at the border and Bobby's position on that because it wasn't a major focus. But you make a very good case because surveillance, I uh, all types of surveillance, ownership rights over my own DNA, something I sued about in New York City. All of these things are a part of sovereignty, and play a role in medical freedom as well too. And I guess I got a little homework to do. I guess I got to look into it more because you make a very compelling case about it, Eduardo.
You're in New York State, and I lived in California, which is a border state. And it definitely, you could see repercussions of all this on Title 42, which, was using COVID as a way to deter migrants. And so I'm just seeing how much COVID was used. Again, that pandemic, that lockdown was really a way to control the masses. And so I suddenly, again, like I mentioned, Ukraine war happened, everyone, Title 42, where did it go? So it's just, there's just so many, not so much, there's nothing aligned here about our principles. We have to get it clear. And I know that our community is divided on this. But anyhow, yes. So
I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you sending me, some reporting and research about this, because it's something that I need to be more read up on. So yeah, I appreciate it.
And let me take it back to something you had mentioned about the people fighting for Palestinian liberation or supporting or who are really the boycott and divestment movement here in the United States, and the connection and maybe even the disconnection that might occur in relationship to our movement that we also were part of, a movement for medical freedom. And let me tell you why. Again, I think Robert F. Kennedy is definitely doing the wrong thing. But I also think, Michael, I think in supporting him and letting him, I think you're also doing the wrong thing in terms of trying to connect those two together. Because I think we all know and we all felt the force of the state against us when the medical mandates came, and on your job. And people could say it was complicated, but it wasn't complicated. It was only complicated because of the mass censorship and mass propaganda and massive lies that the state and the mainstream media all supported doing. The actual thing that was taking place was, and this is why socialists should have seen it, was workers were being kicked out of their jobs by their bosses and by the state and being told they had to do something they didn't want to do or they could be removed. That's a fairly simple thing. That is oppression. And we felt it and we fought it. And that's what the campus protesters and some of them who were wearing masks were trying to do it just to protect their identity. But some of them were wearing masks, as we know the people who went there also were like, we're down with the COVID narrative. Like that is also there. So there is that confusion. But go all the way across the other side. All of us who were fighting the state mandates and the forced vaccinations also know that Israel was a playground for all that stuff. It was a playground for Pfizer. It was a playground. It's also a playground for the biomedical, like the geofencing that's going on that Eduardo's describing on our border. It is becoming a playground for that as well. And so the very same state that came after us 2 to 3 years ago and is still threatening to once again do so in an aggressive way for other reasons potentially, or even again for medical reasons, is taking action and swinging with their proxy in Israel against the people of Palestine. So they are getting oppressed in much more violently over there, obviously, but for the same reason, for reasons of control, of wealth redistribution, of resource acquisition. Those were the reasons why, like, vaccine imperialism became something where China and Russia and the United States are trying to get their vaccines into South America or into Africa. That wasn't trying to help people. What they were trying to do was basically make sure that they were the ones who had you on their dashboard. It wouldn't be Britain or it wouldn't be China, it would be the United States. And so all these forces that were operating in the same way that the US state is operating to use Israel as a proxy against the Palestinians and people in that region, they were going against us. And that's the message we should be bringing to the people who are wearing masks for the reasons of not just protecting their identity, for the reasons of COVID.
So,
be like, dude,
just 1
second. But you got lied to there by the state, and that very same state supported Israel in doing all these measures. So in supporting Israel, we actually make it impossible to be consistent in actually fighting against the very oppression we fought 3 years ago and the same oppression that's being visited.
But I'm not supporting what Israel is doing.
But again, RFK Jr. is doing that, and he's supporting, and so he's what that would say is there is no truth though then he can't be for medical freedom when he's for
wait. But do you think? But Andrew, do you believe it's possible for a Zionist to be for medical freedom?
Now, given what Israel's doing, and if you are not a Zionist now who's breaking from Israel, no, you can't, because that's what's being done. You are going to support in some way, shape, or form the state pushing on people who don't conform to what you tell them they need to do, and that's why
they're. I understand what you're saying, but that's a land dispute that's happening in Israel Palestine, and there's multiple types of military disputes around the world that happen between groups. I don't know if you can inherently say the Israel-Palestine conflict is a medical freedom conflict. There might be some medical freedom,
but that's why Pfizer's in there. That's why it's being used as a playground by Pfizer. Because they understand
it was used by a playground primarily against the Jewish people. That they were the mandates were forced by the Israeli state.
But recently they were doing those polio vaccinations in Palestine as well. So they're getting
that's
in
a good
there.
point. That was wild.
But I'm just saying it's not wild
because the killing. We're going to stop this killing to like save.
I don't think it's accurate to just call it just a land dispute. I mean, it is an act of state repression against fellow workers, against fellow our comrades who are trying to fight it for liberation. Like that's what they've been doing for 45 years since the fact that their land was taken from them.
But what I'm saying is I personally know Jews, conservative Jews, Orthodox Jews, Zionist Jews that before COVID have stood with me and others fighting against fighting for medical freedom and against medically repressive laws, at the same time as they, in various different ways, support the state of Israel. Some are staunch, like Netanyahu supporters. Some are more liberal supporters of what the case are. And what I'm saying is this is a group that is motivated and attracted to working with me and those of us in New York that have been doing this. I don't have to convince them. I don't have to have a roundtable debate with them. They're like, yes, I agree. This is horrible. What do we do? And they're ready to activate and to plan. So if I get into this debate with them, that coalition falls apart.
Right.
And so that issue is one of coalition building for me. And then there's a number of people in the movement that are pro-Palestine, that are a number of very, very good friends of mine. And they need to figure that out too, in their politics as well too, how they build coalitions with pro-Palestinian people, but then also with medical freedom people, and then maintain differences between them as well. It's a difficult thing to do, but I find it's necessary to be effective, because if we don't figure that out when we have these big rallies, actions, lobbying events, whatever they are, we end up with a very, very small impact.
That's why I would say you'd want to ultimately be independent for you. Be independent of RFK Jr. There's no reason to trust him on these issues. He's in my opinion, he's already shown that he can't be consistent about the issue of surveillance or censorship or war or medical freedom. At this point, he knows so much about what's happened. And the thing that I would say is, that's why I would free myself of such a candidate. I'd be like, dude, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna be me and work with the people I can and be me in that place. So if there's Zionists who want to talk about medical freedom, I will disagree about Israel. I've seen people in NCHI, the National Coalition for Health Integrity, who support what Israel's doing. I don't agree with them, but I don't tell them that we're gonna make the world a better place by supporting a candidate or a former candidate who's telling me to go another way, when all those forces are looking us to lock us in. And that's where I have the difficulty. It's not a question of whether a person is right or wrong, but you are urging people to go towards somebody who's been consistently, and I can't put it any other way, but he's consistently lied about the record of Trump, or what Trump has done, as well as may do. And he's pretty consistent, and at very least obscuring it. And I would call that a lie. And I don't, it's wrong, and that's why I would say.
Wait, in obscuring what exactly?
Obscuring
what about Trump?
By saying that a vote for Trump through Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may lead to an end to some war, may lead to a reduction in surveillance and censorship, or even to health. When I think like you stated, even Maha is not even on the platform. That, to me, you're doing essentially what Bernie Sanders did in the Democratic Party. You are sheepdogging people back into the system. And at one point, I might have thought of Bernie Sanders as a person who was like foolish. Now I know he was literally lying to people, and I think that's what RFK Jr. is doing here. I think he's literally lying to people, because I think he knows, and that's why that point about not getting an agreement in writing of some sort is kind of important to me. Like, I still wouldn't vote for him. I'd still say he's doing something wrong. But to me, it shows that he's not serious about the truth in relationship to the kind of world he's telling people will come if we vote for Trump.
I don't know that we're going to get everything that Bobby and others are saying we get if Trump becomes president. Bobby is going to be on the transition team. He is going to be sought after for picking people to be in these agencies. And as long as Bobby Kennedy is around, he's going to continue this conversation and this dialogue on the national stage, which we have never had before. So for medical freedom, when in 2020, when I was losing my job, when I was a diseased dog, when I was the worst of the worst, when I was literally cowering in my house at times with my wife, like, what is happening to the planet right now? To now be in a position where Bobby Kennedy is now extremely close to the highest office in the country and possibly helping to pick the CDC director, the director of the FDA, and the NIH. For me, the contrast between these two, and it's still a problem. I agree with you. It's a problem. It's not a solution. I'm not saying that Bobby Kennedy with Trump now has the solution. It's a new problem. But to have to grapple with that problem compared to the problem I was grappling with 4 years ago, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, like it's a reflection to me of the impact we have had, because you don't get Bobby Kennedy now being on the dais at these big freaking dinners that they have and being brought into this administration. You don't get that without grassroots impact. It's a two things I want to say. One, you said you haven't seen what Bobby has actually done in October on the ground, and you said you trust me because you've seen. But yeah, in October of 2021, he was in the streets of New York City right as I was getting fired, holding a bullhorn with 1,000 people in front of him. He's the only person who ran for president that did that. Jill Stein didn't do that, and I respect Jill and a lot of stuff that she puts out there, but nobody else has done that. And when you look, we ended up with we now have like a celebrity class of doctors in the COVID movement. We do, right? We have people with millions of followers and products and whole businesses. And I've had conversations with people that hate that. They can't stand that. But the truth is, those celebrities in our movement need us and we need them. There's a symbiotic relationship there. When we create events, when we're lobbying in state houses, when we're doing these different things, that doesn't happen without us, but we create platforms to put someone like a Dr. Peter McCullough up on, a Dr. Pierre Corey, that they can then be heard in a different fashion as well too. It works together. So and people who think I'm deifying Bobby, that he's going to solve everything. I don't think so at all. We have a new set of problems we need to deal with if Trump's in the White House and Bobby is helping to influence that. But I'm excited about that set of problems because I remember what my old set of problems was. And I see this in terms of us moving the narrative, moving the dialogue. We now have a former head of the CDC in, what's his name, Redfield, who was there with Trump and helped to put this whole thing in, who is now speaking almost 180 degrees the other way, saying we never should have mandated these things. He's saying, I have a practice. I'm seeing long COVID and long vax injuries in this. Bobby Kennedy was right about everything. We need to reanalyze the way we're looking at vaccination and the way we handle this. This is, for having watched the medical freedom movement for 20 years, I've watched it. I've been involved in it for 6. To see where we're at now, it's hard for me to. I just don't think we can downplay how far we've moved the needle. And there's a long way to go, and it's not perfect. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of issues around Bobby and Trump that I don't support. But when it comes to medical freedom, I see so much progress has been made. I see that the public discourse and what the public is willing to hear and able to hear now. Okay, sure, there's 20-30% will never hear anything. They're going to live in a mask if they can, and and they'll hide in the corner and they'll never hear us. But there's 70-80% that is open to it. In major ways. To me, I just see it as a huge victory, regardless of the pitfalls, the downfalls, the things that aren't perfect.
Roberto, do you want to go, or
you could go if you want?
Yeah, I mean, from my vantage point, first of all, I don't feel like there's been any reason to believe that RFK Jr. is going to be playing that kind of role. It all seems word of mouth. It all seems like, hey, I'm giving. Well, the way I heard it from him, like, I was told if you believe Trump and things like that. That's why I say that thing in writing. But let's go ahead and now put that in writing. Let's put it in writing that Trump that Kennedy's going to be there, because Kennedy is now obscuring the actual record of Donald Trump in all those issues of surveillance, censorship, war, and the fourth industrial revolution. When you consider a character like Peter Thiel, so connected to J.D. Vance, so connected to the Trump campaign, because RFK Jr. is obscuring that stuff, then I know that with our RFK Jr., we now have an enemy in the White House, not an ally, an enemy. Bernie Sanders is not an ally of the left in the Democratic Party. He is an enemy of the working class there, and that's what RFK Jr. is. And I think for people to feel like there's a brief wind in our sails by virtue of that, I personally think that's exactly what the ruling class wants you to believe. That's what they want people to believe in the Democratic Party when they get their so-called left person, and that's what's happening on the other side now, on the so-called more conservative side, which has flipped on issues like you said. I thought fighting against for medical freedom would have been a left issue. Turns out it's a right issue. I don't give a shit about left or right at this point, But I would say that I believe people have to understand. You now have an opponent. If RFK Jr. is in that group, like you mentioned, that gangster group, that the Kennedy family has been part of that family of gangsters. I thought RFK Jr. was different. I think when you tell me the story in 21, I think that guy might have been thinking he was going a different way. But now, to me, he's walked straight back into the swamp. He's become a swamp creature, if you will, using that kind of language, and he's inviting people to come back in because there's a chance we can make this work. And in fact, a chance that many of the people who put this in operation almost get a pass for doing it. I remember Robert Malone sent a tweet out saying all these people making a big deal about Operation Warp Speed. Yes, we're making a big deal out of Operation Warp Speed. And that's Robert Malone, one of these famous doctors. I think those famous doctors have been very cultivated in a particular way to kind of keep the message contained within a particular germ theory, within the idea that vaccines are okay, but we just need them to be tested to some extent, but not to challenge more deeply the notions that are in there in the movement of wait, did the pandemic even happen? Was there maybe it was a scamdemic, which is what I believe. Maybe it was just done to collapse the economy, which is what I believe. And maybe all this stuff that's been done around virology has been fraudulent science in the same way that there's been fraudulent science being done in particle physics and fraudulent science done in cosmology to prop certain kinds of things up. So those voices actually by these celebrities of scientists are being silenced. People who have alternative views, even more radical views, those people are either told, no, that's beyond the pale. Come in here and fight for a better future with me, RFK Jr. and Trump. There's no better future there. Those people are looking to build the exact same prison that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have been constructing for us.
I just want to make one small point before hearing from Eduardo. I disagree on the Bernie Sanders piece because I feel like Bernie Sanders acquiesced basically everything and just slid right back into the Democratic swampy, disgusting place and became a millionaire out of it. I think what we're seeing Bobby do is bring his agenda in and wedging his agenda in. But we will see, because I would predict, if I'm correct in what I'm saying, there will be a resignation of protest at some point that he will try to get as much as he can, and there'll be a moment where it'll be like, whoa, this wasn't what I thought. So anyway, I think there is still currently a difference. The analogy is valid, but I think we have to wait to see, because I do think Bobby is still has his agenda that he's trying to actually get into the Trump administration, not just give it all away. Yeah.
Well, there are three things I think I'll just, as we are looking for a way to wrap up. One is not a fan of Trump, but I am a fan of many of the Trump supporters. I think a lot of them have been isolated, called what was it? Hillary's word. It was a bag
deplorables.
of
Deplorables. Yeah.
I'm a fan of people who are working class, who are the truck drivers in Canada, people who are definitely feeling the pressures of the economic collapse, the people who are feeling the pressures of, or just not the pressures, rather, who are gaslit constantly, online, offline, by politicians. And these are the people I don't want to demonize. And you spoke about coalitions. And I think we are in, whether you're in the a grassroots movement, or whether you're at your local board, you're a parent, or you are at your school, where I have organized and have tried to organize in San Francisco with the families of the Mission District, a largely Latino population in San Francisco. San Francisco, California, for those who may not be aware, because I'm everywhere now. I think that those are the voices that I'm interested in, and we have to figure out how we work with one another. You talked about pro-Palestinian people and Zionists, and I wonder how those groups come to be. And for me as well, to find myself in a rally with people when I was during the lockdowns, we had found ourselves in rallies where people were more on the Trump supporter side. That was uncomfortable for me in the very beginning. Someone who've always been in leftist politics and have campaigned for progressive candidates in San Francisco, California, or even have just, even my background as an anarchist. My best friend lives in North Carolina now, and he is a Trump supporter. And so I just want to highlight the importance of our movement, not to lose their principles, and to also find the challenge to work with one another, even where we might not have this, we're not on the same page about many things, and to listen to one another. You just asked me, Michael Kane, to share with you some of the things that I have looked into, such as geofencing, which I know as a broad topic. You're quite familiar with Alison McDowell's work, but the details of that, I think I can share with you, and I'll send you that. But a lot of people may not be such informed, and maybe they just hear border and block themselves and think that I don't need to hear more. And that's not how we should be operating. I'm willing to listen. We've listened to you and during this discussion, and the other thing too is you're a parent, Michael Kane, and I'm an uncle and a padrino, which is like a godfather to many children, and to a tito, an uncle for so many other children that I have adopted in my life. I've been a foster parent myself. So I want to stress the importance also for our future, how we look at technology, and how anybody running for office, or anybody running for, or any grassroots movement, or any organization, or any group out there working, we need to look at this very, very closely, and what is happening to our world and the future of our children. You're a parent, as you mentioned, and I'm concerned with schools even driving this, tech driven, and putting down pencils, more iPads, more Google Classroom, and we're pushing back. And it seems like I'm always causing the principal constant headaches at my nephew's school with these long emails that I'm sure she sort of skims over. And it's just, these are the things that we have to fight for. And if anything is true, it's to fight in our local communities, which you have done and have been an example of, Michael. And I have fought in my own community. Andy has well. And what I think what I'm looking for, or I want to build rather, is for us to not lose sight of that, to continuously fight those closing forces that I think are lifted by the elite class, and that does include Washington, which they don't really care about how much we're surveillanced. And that, I think, is a benefit to them. I think the 6th of November was a true example, where people went into the Capitol.
6th of January.
6th of January. Sorry, I'm thinking of November next month. Sorry, correct me. 6th of January.
The 6th of November is going to be another fraud, but don't worry about that.
I'm confusing. The 6th of January, where I'm thinking just how much people were so attacked and sought after, even for the smallest of connection. It wasn't necessarily my movement. I don't want anyone to join that movement per se, but I think about if any revolution was to happen, that is an example of what will happen when they come for us. So anyhow, that's what this is to me. My concluding thoughts on how I see our organizing efforts as you work out on the East Coast Andy on the West Coast, and I'm on the South currently, and Make America Healthy Again, which I think we're included as well, because this is the whole entire continent of America. Sometimes I think the USA forgets that. It's something that we can stand by as well. I mean, I truly do believe that healthiness. I'm afraid of what we put into our bodies constantly. I grow my own food, and so I truly believe that we need to be aware and fight against things that are trying to be implemented without our consent or under duress.
That was great.
Yeah,
I love that.
We'll give you the final word, Michael. And I'll just say this, like the one thing I really agreed with what you said was when you said on neither side, whether it's Republican or Democrat, is this the most important election in our lifetime. That is used time and time again to force people into this kettle, like, and in my opinion, it's almost like a war move, forcing everyone into the same pattern and then to use them. This, again, the role that I see elections playing. And I was talking to Brandy, and she's also isn't going to vote, but we have these.
Your wife, by the way.
Yeah, my wife. And we had a conversation the other day. I said, Brandy, okay, look, I know you're not voting, Brandy, but if you had to choose, who would you want to win? Like, it's going to be one of these two, establishment feature in my opinion, either Kamala or Trump. And she went, I think she first went, I think Trump I think she said Kamala first because she thought it might mean that there would be a way of exposing things. And then she was, no, that's not going to work. And then she thought Trump for a second. It's like, no, there's other new problems if Trump gets elected. And that's how I feel about this, is like, regardless of who we're going to get, I think we are going to face an increased attack against us. And that's what I would want people to prepare themselves for, is regardless of who gets elected, know that from the jump, the attack is going to get worse, not better, on us. And I would not want people believing that there is any relief to be found in either of those candidates, whether that be abroad, in terms of fighting wars. But if you have candidates dedicated to wars, and both these candidates are dedicated to wars, even if they talk about, well, who they have to go after, if you have a candidate who's dedicated to killing workers abroad, then they must oppress workers in their own countries to make that possible. So I know what's coming. We know that the economy is going to get worse for us. We know inflation is going to get worse. We know digital currency is kind of coming, and we know the various surveillance apparatus is going to be brought in place, in my opinion, regardless of who comes in place. And I feel like we do a disservice if we let ourselves believe that there's relief to be found in either candidate. Regardless of the fact, I believe our movement on the ground is weak. It will have to become stronger. But I believe it will become stronger when it stops looking up there to see if there's somebody who can help them. And that's the one thing that I want to come back to, that I believe in what you're doing, is regardless of whether I agree with what you're saying about the elections, I do see how you keep a commitment to grassroots building. And that is where the work's going to have to be done.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I don't know when it comes, but the real frontier for us is going to be digital identity and CBDCs. That's the next COVID shot.
Yeah.
The COVID shot they tried to use to make that stuff come, they couldn't pull it off. They showed their hand, whether they meant to or not, I don't know, but they did. They showed us, like, here's what it is. Here's where we're going to go. And at the height of the lockdowns and things like that, in Austria, I think it was January 2022 or December 2021, it became illegal to walk the streets unvaccinated. You could get fined, multiple fines in a day, or jailed. And the Austrians freaking rose up. And then the state rose up. The state backed away. For whatever reason, the state said, we're not willing to kill people right now. Because that was the moment it was coming to, right? Which can really happen, where the state starts to kill people and lock you up, and then you're getting there. In New York City, we didn't get that bad, but what we did get is a lot of my brothers and sisters from New York Freedom Rally going into Cheesecake Factory, Panera Bread, the pizza place, and demanding to be served. And they weren't served, and they got arrested, and they went through that whole process. And when that was happening, I had a very young son at the time. Um, I was doing the organizing I was doing, and I had decided, and I was losing my job and trying to figure out how to take care of my family. And I had decided I'm not going to put getting arrested on my family. I didn't quite have it in me. But I am starting to think now, when am I willing to get arrested? When am I willing to go up to that point? What's coming? And I think it's around the CBDC and digital identity. I think there's a point where you can't walk into this library, this restaurant. You can't scan past that easy pass to go over the bridge you've gone over your entire life. And I don't know where it comes. I feel like a Kamala Harris administration, it might be more expedited, but I could be wrong about that. It could be in the Trump administration through this border security and making America secure, and they get the conservatives to acquiesce because it came from, good old Donnie,
Yeah.
and not, this crazy Kamala,
Right.
so I do see those things. I am thinking about that and wondering where it comes. I think we agree on a lot of that. But I do see benefits of having more Republicans in power now, in state governments, as well as in federal governments. Is only Republicans that made Fauci testify under oath, that made Andrew Cuomo testify under oath, that brought Aaron Siri, one of the greatest medical freedom attorneys of all time, who has done more for parents and children that are unvaccinated than maybe anybody on the planet, that testified to Congress about the safety and efficacy of vaccines. So there is this populist current in a section of the Republican Party. Of course, it's a corporatist party as well, too, and it is dominated by horrendous interests. It's just shifted to where the Democrats are the real evil ones. 30 years ago, it was the Republicans, and there was that populist tendency in the Democrats there, and it just kind of moves around. So from a strategic standpoint, I am supporting more Republicans now than I ever have in my life. I only voted for one Republican in an election ever 2 years ago. This election, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I do know in the local elections, I'm supporting quite a bit of Republicans because I'm seeing legislation that is possible to bring more freedom to people, especially medical freedom. And I want to end with a challenge to both of you for next time, because this is what I'd like. Because this is the I think the second time I'm coming to this question. I brought it up last time.
Yep.
And I'd like to do this. The problem I have with the don't vote, maybe more anarchists, build a whole new system. The problem I have with it is, what do we do? What's the action plan? What's the tactics? What's the strategy high level? And what's the actual tactics day to day, week to week, month to month? And I feel like I don't see that. I'd be down if I see that, I think. See, the work that I'm doing and the stuff I'm doing, I see what my strategy is, what my tactics is. I know what my day is laid out tomorrow. I know what I'm actually doing and where it's going. What you guys have laid out to me for the second time now, I've heard before. It is enticing to me. When I was younger, it was very enticing to me. I definitely was leaned much more anarchist, and I didn't vote for a long, long time. Now I have kids though. And the voting thing is actually a different thing for me. I see how it impacts my kids and their future. So I want to put that as a challenge to our next conversation. Help walk me through, what does it mean? What do I do differently?
Yep.
Who are the leaders out there, or the thought leaders, or whatever, that can help to crystallize a vision for me that I can then walk? Because I don't see where I'm walking. And I'm not against what you guys are laying out. I just don't see the path. So why don't you guys work on however long it takes to come up with a structure for us to have that conversation? And I'd actually even, or maybe even do it without me and just tell me, hey, Mike, watch this, so I could learn and then come on.
No, I think it would be great. I think it's a great idea.
I need some education there. I need to kind of understand, because I'm not unwilling to go there. I just don't know how to go there. I don't know where we're going.
I would welcome that conversation, and for you even to bring the same sort of skepticism, like I've brought with my skepticism about the road you're walking with regards to RFK Jr. But to bring that kind of skepticism to the way I would imagine, like how I think of this thing, because I do think, if I might have some ideas about what I think is going to have to happen, but it helps for people who are looking a different way and seeing other things to say, but what about this? What about that? I don't get that. This is not consistent with that. So I definitely think that would be a good conversation. And
Great.
I think if Trump wins, we'll also be able to kind of evaluate some of the things that we thought might come. If Kamala Harris wins, that's not as fun. That's not as interesting. But I think this conversation that conversation you're talking about we need to have it no matter who wins.
Yeah.
I welcome that. Michael, let's do it. I welcome that. I can share with you my organizing efforts in Colombia or in France or in California or here in Mexico where I'm currently on. I'd love it. No.
Yeah, and I
don't believe in highfalutin talk, and I don't think that it's just a matter of, being here on this screen here. And so let's have a conversation.
And I'm thinking, well, just we text each other. When you say, hey, are you guys ready to do that? I kind of want to see what these election results will be.
Sure.
Maybe it's something December, January, or something like that. But yeah, I would love to do that.
All right. Excellent. That sounds good. This was great, gentlemen.
I
always love talking to you guys. I always like that I get a little bit more freedom to talk here and to talk into wider directions. Sometimes I'm so medical freedom focused.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun for me to come on and to pick this up. And I'm glad that you continue to allow me to come on here because I enjoy it a lot.
And we've done this a few times, and you agree with this as well, Michael, is like the notion of being able to sustain. We can having trust but disagreeing.
Yeah.
Can you build trust while disagreeing? Because we're going to need to be able to do that. And that is something you can only do by doing it. And so this is what we're trying to do. And I think there's some people who are going to be like, why are you letting Michael Kane blah 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 blah? And I get it, folks. I get it, but I don't agree with you. I think there's a reason why Michael Kane has earned my trust, but he's also, I disagree with him. And so he's giving me the opportunity. He was like, Andy, I'm going to come on your show and you can disagree with me openly now. So why would I not take that? And then I want to hear
and Andy, I think, we've dealt with plenty of different people that we've hit these points with them and then they won't have the conversations anymore. And it's just such a letdown on so many levels because then that's it. It's done. Then there is no more learning. There's no more interaction. There is no more building. And I'm glad you guys don't have that shutter down philosophy and I don't either. As long as the respect is there, you disagree about everything. It's fine.
And and I think this is true for you. We're making the case to all our audiences that this is how we're going to have to be dealing with each other. And so not just doing it to you. I'm kind of saying, folks, we all have to kind of learn how to do this and see where you do find where your lines are. Okay. But try maybe see if where those can be extended. And if you think it's a question of principle and you can't, I guess you got to figure out what to do at that point. You know?
I'd love to sit on those meetings of yours where you have those coalitions where everyone's different,
I do have one question. Did Teachers for Choice come up with a position around voting for Trump or not?
No, that's a great question. I'm surprised. No, we still haven't agreed.
Okay.
And I know we need to wrap up.
Yeah.
But there was 2 Maha virtual town halls. One was set up that Bobby was going to be on, Trump was going to be on, a bunch of other people, and everyone's like, all right, Trump on a town hall, virtual town hall, talking Maha, not Donald Trump Jr., not a surrogate, it's actually him. Because of the hurricanes, apparently, they rescheduled it. It was rescheduled for this past Tuesday, just a few days ago, and it got canceled with a pretty flimsy answer. And even the MAGA people, so on the Teachers for Choice Steering Committee, we have a very wide range of people. We have MAGA conservatives, Trump's conservatives, one socialist. We have a couple of anarchists. We're a diverse group. Even the MAGA people were like, second cancellation, that's not cool. So it's we're kind of we're just undecided. And what are we? 11 days out, whatever it is now. And listen, if that's just where Teachers for Choice falls on our endorsement, that's where we fall. I've really appreciated my steering committee being involved, having opinions, having good debates about. When it was Bobby Kennedy, it was one of the easiest meetings we ever had. We're like, yeah, of course, like we'll go to war for this guy. But now at the Trump thing, everyone's like, nope, we haven't decided. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Michael Kane. Really appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Well, let's conclude here. Just hold on a second here. Well, that does it for this week's episode. Michael Kane was the former national grassroots organizer for Children's Health Defense. He is the founder of TeachersForChoice.org, and the lead plaintiff was in Kane versus de Blasio, having been denied a religious exemption request and appeal, which was big. I remember being on top of that.
We're still in court. We're still in court for 3 years. Still going. Yeah.
And keep us up to date with that. I will be following. I'll be following. Anyhow, so What's Left is a weekly political podcast as channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes where you found this episode, or on our blog at what'sleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast /channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you've heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications into any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. And you can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes where we found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Andy and with our invited guest, Michael Kane. Thank you so much for being here. Truly an honor. Again, always having you is a pleasure, and having these lively discussions with you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all for listening. All right.